Hello and welcome to the Wicker Library. My name is Aaliyah. So happy to have you here today. I have been working on this video for a little over a week now, and I've already read the first book in this reading experiment, which is, if you saw the intro, basically reading as many NetGalley arcs as I can. If you're unfamiliar with what a NetGalley arc even is, ARC stands for Advanced Reader Copy, and NetGalley is a reviewer website where you can request books before they're published in exchange for a review. So I've been lucky enough to be accepted for a lot of books, but I haven't gotten around to reviewing all of them and reading all of them, and I want to dedicate time for that. Instead of obtaining new books, I want to kind of step away from overconsumption, not just buying books, but getting so many from the library, which obviously support your local libraries. I love a good library, but I have so many books that I own already or have copies of that are waiting for me to be reading, so I just wanted to focus on the books that I already have and own. So I'm so happy I did, because the first book that I just finished was There's Always This Year by Hanif Abdurraqib, and this is the same author as They Can't Kill Us Until They Kill Us, which I read earlier this year, and it's going to be a favorite of the year easily. It's a phenomenal essay collection, and this one was no different. This one focuses on basketball, but it's definitely not just about basketball. All of the essays take this form of a basketball game, like they're structured in that way. And obviously, if it wasn't clear, all of these reviews will be spoiler free, especially since the books aren't even out yet, and I will leave the release dates on screen somewhere. I don't know off the top of my head, but I'm so thankful to NetGalley for approving me of this book, as it was just a beautiful essay collection. I don't know much at all about basketball. I'm going to be so honest. I picked this up just because I trust in the author to write something beautiful. And he did just that. I know enough about basketball to, have my bearings about me, but I did have to look up a lot of things while I read, and personally I enjoy that. I feel like it shouldn't take away from a book if you have to look up some other things. It just means you're learning more, and if I have to look up who is who and like what player is on what team, then I'm not complaining. So I just enjoyed reading this so much. I think that this author does a brilliant job of making you care about things you may not ever care about, actually. So I was invested in these basketball games. I was invested when players were being traded between teams. I felt betrayed when certain players left certain teams, and I think that's just a testament to the writing, making me care about a sport as a very not sporty person, personally. And yeah, I thought it was phenomenal. I would definitely recommend you all keep it or put it on your anticipated releases of 2024, because you need to pick it up. It is phenomenal, and don't let the fact that it looks like it's just a sports book deter you from picking it up. It's just so well written, and it was such an enjoyable time. The next book I am going to pick up is You Know What You Did, and I forgot the author. I'm just remembering it off the top of my head, but I will leave a picture there, and I will pop back in when I have finished that next book.
Anywhere you go, you belong. Anywhere you say, anywhere.
Hello. So I am back to update you on my thoughts and opinions about You Know What You Did by KT Nguyen. Now, this is unfortunately going to be a DNF for me. I got to 20% of the way through and saw that there was 6 hours left, roughly, of reading time, and I just did not have that in me. So let's get into some of the reasons why this book just did not work for me. And I do want to preface that I'm very thankful to NetGalley for this early copy, and I don't want to let this review deter you from picking this book up yourself. You may enjoy it, and also a lot of the issues I had with this book personally were from kind of an editing standpoint. Like, I just felt like this book was under-edited, and that could be because it is a review copy, so it may be going through some more rounds of editing. It doesn't come out until 2024, so there is still time, but yeah, let's get into some of my thoughts. So for me, this book fell flat in mainly 2 categories, and that was the characters and the writing. The plot itself was intriguing, and I really enjoyed some of the themes that this book started to explore, but personally, I didn't care enough about the characters, and I really didn't love the writing style, so the plot for me was just kind of an afterthought and wasn't really worth continuing the book for. As for the characters, they were just incredibly tropey. They were one-dimensional. The main character's head was really frustrating to be in, and it was very scattered. And this is a thriller story, and I know that in a lot of thrillers, there's this scattered, kind of fractured component to the writing that's very intentional, and it adds another layer to the story, but that's not really what was happening here. The story felt fractured in a way that could have really been fixed with some editing and some different formatting, honestly. There are 3 different times happening. So there's the past, there's the present, and there's sort of this future element, and they're all written in the same tense, in the same character's head, and there's no distinction between them, except sometimes it's italicized, sometimes it's not, and it's really difficult to follow, and it feels like it doesn't need to be complicated. It doesn't need to be like this, and it just makes you uninterested in reading further because you just don't know what's happening. And to be honest, I didn't care because I didn't care about the characters, which was another point where this story just was not working for me. The characters were incredibly juvenile. They weren't acting like adults, and the one character that was a teenager was just the trope of the 14-year-old kid who hates the world, hates their parents, is bratty and spoiled, and she was just frustrating. She had no redeeming attributes. She was a cookie-cutter character, and she pissed me off so much, which was really unfortunate because there are themes of mothering and motherhood in this story that could have been so interesting if I actually cared about the daughter, which I did not. But the final issue I had with this book was the writing style. It felt very juvenile. Again, I keep kind of falling back on that word, and I know juvenile fiction and children's fiction can be amazing and well written. That's not what I'm trying to insinuate. I'm not trying to insinuate this book is childish by any means, but the writing was just spoon-feeding the reader information. It was not a balance of telling and showing. There wasn't really nice writing anywhere. Not that every book needs to be flowery or anything like that, but it was just, it had no author voice to it, which sounds really harsh, but was just how I felt about it. Writing and the characters fell flat for me, and personally, I read because I love writing and characterization, so this book just was not for me. But if you are intrigued to pick it up yourself, I wouldn't warn you away from it. I think it has some promising attributes, and again, it might just need another round of editing or several. But this book does come out in 2024, and I'll put the actual date that it comes out on screen somewhere. So yeah, that was the thoughts for that book. But I am going to dive into a new book that I don't know if I'm going to film or push, because currently there are some issues going on with the publisher, where the publisher isn't taking accountability for some of the workers at the company spewing racist and horrible things on the internet, and they're just ignoring it. And I don't really want to promote that publisher, but I will be reading the book and supporting the author independently, but I may not be promoting the next book I'm reading. So I have finished the book I was reading before, and there's still currently a boycott going on for that publisher, which is St. Martin's Press and all of their imprints. So because no action has been really done on their part yet, I won't be talking about that book until action is made. So I'm going to be jumping into the next arc that I have, which is the Kamogawa Food Detectives by Hisashi Kashiway, and this is translated from Japanese by Jessie Kirkwood. And I'm really excited to get into some translated fiction. I really enjoy translated fiction, and this one sounds really cozy. It's all about a father-daughter duo, and they basically run this restaurant that creates food that gets the patrons and the visitors of the restaurant, it gives them memories of something they may have forgotten. That's a horrible explanation. Once I actually read it, hopefully it will, be easier to explain. But I'm really excited to dive into it, and I will update you all when I have finished. So I have finished reading The Kamogawa Food Detectives by Hisashi Kashiway, and this book was so cozy and it was so much fun. I would highly recommend it, especially if you have enjoyed that book series Before the Coffee Gets Cold. It's a very similar style in which it's told just in vignettes, and it details a bunch of different little instances of this restaurant, and there's this father-daughter duo, and they try and recreate meals from their visitors' pasts, and it's so sweet, it's so wholesome, and I really enjoyed it. I would give it probably about 4 stars, 3.5 to 4 stars. I do wish there was a bit more character development, and I wish we took a little more time with some of the characters, whether that be the father and daughter or some of the regulars that came into the restaurant. It felt like the structure of the book got to be very repetitive at a certain point, because to a beat, each chapter was the same, and it did get a little bit boring, not in any very horrible way. Like, I would still definitely recommend you pick up this book, and I would get a physical copy for myself, honestly, to share with friends and family, because I know other people who would enjoy reading this. But I do think there could have just been a little more time spent on characterization, because the plot was there, the vibes were there, the descriptions of food were incredible. I was so hungry while reading this book, and I was craving so many different types of food, and I would not recommend reading this on an empty stomach because you will just have so many cravings, and the descriptions of food were really just very well done. And yeah, it was an enjoyable read. I don't have much more to say about it than that. I would definitely keep it on all of y'all's radars. And yeah, I'll leave the date that it is released on the screen somewhere. And I think the next book I want to dig into is We Ate the Dark by Mallory Pearson. The author of this book was so kind to give me an advanced reader copy personally, so I'm really excited to get into this. I just know that it's a horror story, it's a thriller, it's sapphic, and it's like Southern Gothic vibes and energy. So I'm very excited to get into that. And I will see you all when I have finished. So I have finished another arc. It was not actually We Ate the Dark, but I am 20% of the way through that book. I'm reading it very slowly, but it is a longer book. But I am absolutely loving that book. I'm loving the writing. I'm loving the atmosphere. I'm obsessed with the characters. And yeah, I can't wait to talk more about that book once I've finished. But as for what I did just finish this morning, I read The Oxherd Boy by Regina Link, and this is an illustrated book all on parables of love, compassion, and community, and the description reads, inspired by thousands of years of Chinese thought, an enchanting and heart-opening illustrated fable about a young boy who explores the many ways to make meaning and find joy in the everyday. And it was just really, really sweet. I gave it 5 stars. If you were a fan of The 3 Questions, I think the book was called, I'll leave a picture of it up. If you were a fan of that as a child, I think you'd really enjoy this book. It has a similar energy. It was very sweet and kind and heartfelt. And yeah, it was a very simple book, but it was 5 stars. I would highly recommend it. I think it's one of those books that's great to read to young children out loud, but it's also enjoyable as an adult as well. And the illustrations were just beautiful, so highly recommend that one. And I'm going to get back into We Ate the Dark because I'm obsessed with it right now, and I can't wait to just get more into it. Just finished We Ate the Dark, finally. It took me about 2 weeks, so this vlog has gone on for quite a while, and I'm excited to wrap it all up. But I really enjoyed We Ate the Dark. I thought it was super well written. I loved the writing the most. The writing style was just exactly what I wanted. It was full of witchiness and eeriness, and there were ghosts, and there were sapphic characters, and I can't eloquently even say what this book is about because I really don't want to spoil it. It is much more fantastical than I thought going into it. It has much more to do with witches and magic, and I had a really good time reading it. The characters were really engaging. And again, I come back to the writing style. There were just so many beautiful quotes, and it was so lyrical. And yeah, I really, really loved it. I will say I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. I think the ending for me was where things fell flat. It definitely felt rushed at the end, and I really would have liked to understand more of the rules of the world, and before all of this magic stuff started happening, I would have liked to understand more of the magic so it didn't feel like it was kind of coming out of nowhere and then suddenly things were happening, and the pacing just took off at the end. I really enjoyed the pacing at the first 2/3 of the book. It was paced really well. It was slower, but it took its time with things, and I loved that. And then suddenly shit hit the fan, and it didn't really keep that pacing for me. Although it is most likely going to become a series, and I'm so excited to hopefully get a hold of the second book as soon as it is even available. I don't even know if it's written yet, but I'm just so thankful to the author for giving me an arc of this book. It was such an enjoyable read, and besides the ending feeling a bit rushed, and honestly I feel like that could be tidied up a bit with editing. I just feel like some of the secrets were kept too long, and then some of the character motivations were kind of iffy, and just at the very end is where things kind of faltered out for me, which is why it's not a complete 5-star, but it's still a phenomenal book, and I cannot believe it is a debut story either. I cannot wait to pick up everything and anything by this author. I love her writing style, I love her characterization, and the themes explored in this book were just so enjoyable and so up my alley. And yeah, I would highly recommend you put this book on all of your lists, all of your anticipated TBRs, because I will be getting a physical copy as soon as I can, because I would love to annotate and mark up this book, because it would also benefit so much from a reread. I think it would just be so much better the second time around, and the first time around it was already really good. So yeah, I would highly recommend it. I also picked up a little graphic novel that I was given an arc of, and that was The Baker and the Bard by Fern Hott. This was a very cozy fantasy kind of read. It was very sweet. My favorite part of this story was the art. They are an incredible artist, Fern. Their writing was also enjoyable. The characterization was a little it faltered a little for me. I didn't much care for the characters in particular, but the plot was really fun. It follows these 2 characters who are kind of like these fantastical little creatures from a cozy fantasy, like exactly how you would think those creatures would look. And they go on this little adventure to get basically ingredients for this special order, and they make friends, and it's very sweet, and I did really enjoy this story. I read it very quickly. The art style was beautiful. It was adorable. It was so warm and comforting to read. I think the queer representation in it also will, make a lot of people feel seen, and I love that for a story. I do have a few critiques of it, nothing too major. As I mentioned before, the characters, I didn't much feel attached to either of them. They were kind of there. They felt like outlets for the plot to progress, which you know, it happens. And I do feel like the rules of this world weren't explained at all. There's a difference between mortals and non-mortals, I assume, maybe immortals and fairies, and they all look similarly fantastical, so I have no idea how you tell these creatures apart. But these are all little nitpicks, and I gave this book about 3-4 stars. It was very sweet, and although I wouldn't personally pick up a copy for myself, I would definitely gift it to some people I know and who would really enjoy it. So yeah, those were all of the 2 recent books I read. And as for wrapping up this vlog, I have to admit that I started off this vlog with like 7 or 8 arcs, and I read a lot of them, but I also requested a lot of new arcs, so I still have 8 arcs to get to. So there will definitely be future vlogs and future reading challenges like this, because I do really want to get through a lot of them. But everyone can clap for me because I got through all of the 2023 arcs I had, and now I can wait until 2024 to really get caught up again, because all of the rest of the books come out then. Most of the books in this vlog come out in 2024, but you know, I'm doing my best and I have a lot more to read, but I do want to focus on my physical TBR next, as much as it's been really helpful getting through all of these advanced review copies. I do really want to start tackling my physical TBR, so you'll probably see a lot of videos with books I already own and start to finally read. So you can all look forward to that. And as for a closing, thank you all for watching. Thank you all for subscribing, liking the video, commenting. I love hearing everyone's thoughts. And if you made it all the way to the end of this video, which I know is going to be rather long, feel free to comment a butterfly. I'm looking at the cover of The Baker and the Bard, and there's like butterfly moth creatures. So yeah, thank you all for watching, and I will see you in the next video.